What's up, fellow Merchant Guild enjoyers? It's Teak, and I've been seeing a ton of people ask about how to make money in chat recently, so I figured it's about time I make some last epoch content. So I'm going to walk you through my Merchants Guild philosophy and gold making methods that have been working extremely well for me the last week or so of playing MG. This will likely end up being a few part series as there's a ton to go over, but I'm going to give as thorough of an overview as I can in this one. I'll start with the basics and we'll move on to some more intricate stuff. So if you want to skip ahead over things you might already know, there's timestamps in the description for you. We have two components to factions in Last Epoch: favor and reputation. Favor is essentially a currency that's used to buy and sell items in the bazaar, and reputation is what you receive when you earn and spend favor. You'll earn favor whenever you gain experience, whether it's through killing monsters, completing quests, or picking up XP books from experienced echoes in monoliths. Reputation comes mainly from earning or spending favor. You'll get a small amount on monster kills or when gaining XP, just like favor. However, you gain an increased amount whenever you spend favor, whether that's from buying items or listing items on the market. You don't actually need to sell an item to gain reputation. You'll be charged favor on listing the item, and that'll reward you with the reputation. There's also a rank system in place that throttles when and how you can purchase specific items in the bazaar, and you'll need at least rank 1 to sell items, and depending on what you're trying to buy, you'll have to hit the rank milestones that reward the ability to buy those items. For example, if you're trying to buy unique weapons with legendary potential, you'll need rank 6. If you're going to buy unique boots with legendary potential, you'll need rank 8. The best method to grinding through the ranks is to hop into monoliths, push corruption as high as you can possibly handle, and try to target the experience reward echoes in those monoliths. Don't forget that clear speed is also really important, so don't just blindly push corruption as high as you can. Make sure you're able to clear stuff really fast as well. And make sure you're spending your favor by listing items you have drop. Even if you don't end up making much from them, like I mentioned before, you'll gain rep whenever you list the items itself, whether it sells or not. The first and by far the most important thing to money making is knowing the value of the items you're selling. This means that you're likely going to have to do a bit of research to figure out what people are playing and what types of stats they're prioritizing. Luckily for us, tools like Last Epoch tools exist where we can sift through some of the builds easily and see what types of mods are desirable for those builds. For example, if we hop over to LE tools, click on builds, we can actually see some content creators' builds being posted. If we click on the link, we can sort of make an educated guess on how popular that build is going to be, and then we can swap back over to LE tools and click the build planner. Here's a Jelker's marksman build that has a few different builds and playstyles that I know for a fact is relatively popular. So we'll take a look through the items, and from those we can basically gauge what's going to sell well for that build. So for the first example, here's the daggers. On this dagger, we have crit multi, armor shred, and between the two daggers, we have flat and % lightning damage stats. So it's using T7 crit multi, so it's pretty safe to assume that any T6 or T7 dagger with crit multi is going to be relatively easy to sell in the market. In this build, we also have a Peak of the Mountain with T7 increased health, an Exsanguinous with reduced bonus damage taken from crits, and Frostbite Shackles with missing health gained as ward. And then we have Last Steps of the Living with hybrid health. So we can gauge pretty reasonably that health is important for this build. Reduced bonus damage taken from crits is moderately important. It looks like the stat exists on one of his pieces of gear as an exalted stat. And then for the weapons, we're focusing on lightning damage and crit multi-related stats. So now that we have an idea of how to identify stats that will have some value, we need to be able to quickly gauge whether or not an item is even worth buying or selling. If you've ever crafted on an item in this game, you'll quickly realize that trying to craft on an item where you have 1 really good mod and 3 really bad mods is a horrible experience. So let's say you have a 3 LP unique and you're trying to make an exalted item to slam into that. You're generally going to want at least 3 good affixes, right? Sometimes even 4, just in case your affix choice doesn't hit. At least you're not completely bricking that item. So you're going to want 3 good affixes, and one of those mods is going to be tier 6 or tier 7, depending on how expensive what you're putting into it is. And the other 2 are at least tier 5. If an item has 1 really good T7 mods and 3 really terrible mods, you're going to need to burn through a lot of forging potential just to get rid of those terrible mods. There's a few different ways you can do it, like you can YOLO it with a rune of removal, or you can use Glyph of Insight and then a rune of research. But regardless of how you do it, each way poses some sort of risk that will impact your forging potential. The other thing to keep in mind is the base type really can matter. So let's say you have a belt with tier 7 cooldown reduction. There's a huge market difference between a T7 cooldown reduction on a terrible base and one on a desirable base. On a terrible base, it's still going to have some value, but on a desirable base, like a spider silk sash, it's going to have a lot of value because people are actually using that spider silk sash base in their builds. So with that knowledge, we can basically assume a few different things. An item with a desirable mod will be a lot more valuable with multiple desirable mods or very few mods on it. Forging potential matters, and base type can bring a lot of additional value on an item. So now that we have a decent idea on what factors makes an item valuable, let's move on to the next section. Let me start off by saying that I like the loot filter in Last Epoch, and it's a quite powerful tool, but it leaves a lot to be desired in my opinion. We're limited to 75 total rules, and we can't filter by open prefixes, suffixes, or forging potential. I will say, though, that highlighting things like idols and filtering out rare and magic and set items is definitely a huge quality of life, and it'll reduce a lot of the clutter on your screen. But for the future, I really hope they add some role ranges, a sound cube, map markers, as well as more rule slots. That being said, there's some public filters you can use on either Last Epoch tools or Discord, such as the Sanctum Market, and I'll link those in the description for you to check out. Just keep in mind, a lot of these filters hide all exalted items, and I really think that's a huge mistake. Make sure if you download one of these filters, you're at least editing them to show all exalted items. Trust me on that one. Another thing is setting up your item display so that glancing at an item can give you a good amount of details about that item. There's two specific options in the gameplay tab of the options menu that'll allow you to adjust the way items are displayed. So the first option is affix indicators. This option shows small dots on either the left or the right of the item to indicate how many prefixes and suffixes it has respectively. The second option is name length. Personally, I play on normal length item names, but long length item names may be a good fit for helping cut down the time it takes to glance at an item or for learning the affixes. Learning the names of the affixes can also help a lot. For example, if a body armor, helmet, or relic drops with the rogue's prefix, that item will have an affix on it that relates to the rogue's specific skills in some way. The of the ox suffix is an affix that grants % increased health. Each generic stat has its own name, and each class-specific stat shares a name with a pool of other class-specific stats. Knowing this will save you a lot of time when quickly glancing at an item on the ground. If you do decide to make your own loot filter, use the method I went over previously of sifting through popular builds, and just make notes on the idols and stuff like that they're using. At the bare minimum, your loot filter should include some highlighting for idols, so it's much easier to pick out the ones that might sell. It can be extremely annoying to sift through a bunch of idols. As far as the more general items go, I'll give you a quick rundown of what I do in my loot filter. So for stout idols, we're always looking for health % as a prefix, and the suffixes that sell pretty well are flat health, elemental resist, or any specific resistance. So like cold resist, lightning resist, fire resist. For small idols, we have as prefixes healing received, damage over time, and dodge rating. All are pretty decent. And for suffixes, we're looking for just resist. So that would be void resist, poison resist, necrotic resist, or physical resist. And then for the small Ligonian idols, it would be mana armor and warder tension as prefixes. And then on our suffixes, we're looking for flat health or any specific resistance. The last bit of advice I want to give is that it helps to know item drop rate and probability of an item dropping with specific amounts of LP. In order to see the drop rate of uniques, you can head over to Last Epoch Tools or Tunk Lab. Both of these resources will give you an overview of all the uniques, where they drop, and what your odds of each bracket of legendary potential are. So we're going to do some price checking. I don't really have any items that are really that variable in price right now that I can show that I haven't already sold. So I'm just going to, we'll just pretend with me that this isn't locked. I bought this yesterday because it was posted for really, really cheap. So just bear with me, and we'll just assume that this can be traded. All right. So we're looking at T7 cooldown recovery speed, and it's on a spider silk stash, like I mentioned earlier. So we're going to try to price check it. We're going to grab cooldown recovery speed, tier 7. So if we take a look at the general price of that mod itself, It's around 500K. There's one listed that was just listed. It has zero forging potential. That's why it's cheap. But here we have a 1.5 mil. So our baseline price is between about 1 and 2 mil. Now we can see what our base price, our price with the base. So on a spider silk sash itself, it's starting off at 10 mil. And this one has very little forging potential. So we can look at about 12 mil. Now with this version, there's also an open suffix. So if we want to look at open suffix, we can get a better idea of the price. And these are selling for between 30 and I guess I would say 30 and 50 mil. They both have forging potential. So uh that's our base rolls are also not great. We're sitting like at a mid-tier roll, so 38 on poison, 39 on cold. So somebody that's looking for higher stats would have to waste some potential on re-rolling those implicits. But overall, I would say if I was going to list this item, it'd probably be between like I'd probably start at like 40 mil, maybe maybe a little bit more because it does have LE damage over time, which is somewhat desirable. Minion damage could also be desirable. Yeah, so that like I mentioned, Spider Silk is a really good base. So generally speaking, they're going to be a little bit more than everything else. We can also check it out on a Praetorian belt, which is the highest armor roll on a belt slot. So we have here we're starting at 15, 20. But it's useful to get an idea of what they're selling for on other bases. Yeah, so that pretty much takes care of the belt. I have a dagger here that we can use for a comparison too. We're looking at T6 multi with increased lightning damage. So I'll go ahead and check out daggers and we'll go general crit multi. We'll look at tier 6 and this item has an open suffix. So we're going to search tier 6 first. We're looking at about 120K as the baseline starting price. These are all 4 stats. So let's go ahead and check open suffix. And I want to make sure I have some forging potential on them. So we'll look at forging potential. So we're jumped up to about 200K just for that. Now you could try to look through these items to see if you could find one with lightning damage. There's 141 pages though, so we're not going to bother. Instead, I would drop this down and we're going to switch to lightning damage. Change the rarity to exalted. We'll take a look now. So we're looking at, with these mod rolls, 8 million is the starting point. So we also have armor shred, which this one does, but it's T5 crit multi. And there's also only 2 forging potential left. So this one has lightning damage, but T5 crit multi. So if I was going to price this here, I would definitely charge a premium for that armor shred as well. So I'd be looking at probably, honestly, I'd be probably looking at like 60 plus. Like well, here we have a 50, and this is a T6 with lightning damage, some forging potential, but it also has a dead stat on the suffix. I mean, maybe not. Maybe there's some value in stun chance, but I would definitely you could actually just seal that, and then you're left with open suffixes. So 50 mil would probably be a pretty good starting point for this dagger. Here's another stun chance. And that seems like there's something similar, 500 mil. That's quite a high price on that one. I definitely wouldn't price this around that. Yeah, I would say like somewhere between 50 and 80 mil would be a starting point for that dagger. The see if it would sell at that and then relist if it doesn't. You could also make an argument for checking tier 7 prices, which are going to be really high. So let's swap this to exalted. Say we had an open suffix on a tier 7. We're looking at starting at 12 mil for 2 dead prefixes, or sorry, a dead prefix and a dead suffix. Yeah, these are definitely getting a little bit more expensive here. So we get to 20 mil. There isn't really a comparable item here. I looked at this earlier, so I kind of already know that there's nothing that we can really compare to with lightning damage on the prefix and a good suffix. So we'd probably be looking at like a one stat would probably be the best to compare this to. So we look at this one stats, that's 3 forging potential. There's a one stat with 30 for 228. So yeah, probably about like a quarter of the price of that would be a good place to start with this other dagger. Or sorry, a third. So yeah, around like 80 mil, I'd probably list it and then adjust from there. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of price checking. You just want to kind of get a broad idea of like comparable items and then list your item like somewhere in that range. As far as idols go, if you're trying to price check that, Godspeed to you, sir. The idol market is wild. There's 96,000 pages here. If we're just looking, for example, health and health search, and there's going to be 690 pages. So that's quite a lot of idols to sift through. So when I'm doing something like this, I'm not wasting a whole lot of time on it. Let's say I had like a 5% health and then 20 flat. I would just like throw a gold cost in here. So we'll start at 1 million and we'll see what we're looking at for ones that cost like around 1 million. So we're looking at pretty bad rolls, like 3%. Here's a 414. We'll search 2 mil. Sorry. We'll search 2 mil. We're up to a 425, but that was listed 22 days ago and nobody has bought it still. So let's go to 500,000. I just searched 25 million. Yeah, I did. So I said 520, right? So there's a 516 for 2.5. So in order to not waste a whole lot of time on this, I would probably just list this for like 3 to 5 mil, somewhere in that range. Maybe start at 4, work your way down. But price checking idols is just a terrible experience. So that pretty much covers the price checking portion. Very last piece of advice I can give you is always be selling. Even if something's only worth 100K, 50K, whatever the price may be, just list it. All your small sales will quickly add up, and it's really nice to have a constant stream of income from the bazaar rather than relying on one big drop. It's really nice when it happens when you get one big drop, but a good chunk of your income is going to come from small nickel and dime sales. And that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I'll go more extensively into each of these sections in following videos, but for this one, I want to keep it relatively brief. I probably forgot some stuff, but as always, if you have any questions or criticism, definitely leave it in the comments and I'll try to get back to you ASAP. I'm usually pretty good about responding to messages.